Urgent Vikings fan! Look at what just happened. Nobody saw this coming, huh? But first, make sure to subscribe to the channel because we bring you daily videos with the latest your team news, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. The Vikings must continue investing in their offensive line. Kevin O'Connell took the podium moments after the Minnesota Vikings season ended. A 143 season ended abruptly as the offensive line was dominated in a playoff loss to the Los Angeles Rams. He had just watched the Rams sack Sam Darnold 9 times, and O'Connell was fuming in a way that would make Bud Grant proud. "We've got to find a way to solidify the interior of the pocket," O'Connell said. "There could be 1,000 excuses made, but for me, it's the foundation of the interior of the pocket that we're going to take a long look at." Almost 3 months after O'Connell channeled Mike Zimmer burying Kellen Mond's career, the Vikings overhauled their offensive line. They brought in Ryan Kelly and Will Fries as free agent splashes, jettisoning Garrett Bradbury and Ed Ingram to make room. Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill will be back next season, and Vikings fans haven't been this excited about an offensive line since Randall McDaniel was moonlighting as a fullback. But looking at the current group, it feels like a job that isn't done. It starts with what the Vikings brought in during free agency. Fries and Kelly's arrival sent shockwaves through a fan base who watched Bradbury fare about, as well as a fan trying to last 10 seconds in an octagon with Brock Lesnar, or watched Ingram size 76 clodhoppers trip anyone within a 20-foot radius over the past 3 seasons. But there's also a risk with both players that could leave the Vikings back where they started. Fries was considered the top guard on the market. After the Kansas City Chiefs used the franchise tag on Trey Smith in February, he was also one of the best guards in football before breaking his leg last season, posting an 86, 9 overall grade in 268 offensive snaps. But he also had 3 average seasons before his payday, logging a 61, 2 overall grade in his first full year as a starter in 2023. While his grades increased each season leading up to last year's breakout, you have to wonder if this is a case of a player breaking out or one who got hot at the right time. The bidding war that ensued to obtain Fry's services is a good sign, but it's something the Vikings must consider. It's a lot like what they're getting in Kelly, who played alongside Fries in each of the past 4 seasons. The 31-year-old is as rough as toilet paper at a rest stop and has allowed just 10 quarterback hits over the past 5 seasons. By comparison, Bradbury allowed 11 quarterback hits over the past 2 seasons. But there's also some buyer beware with Kelly. He missed 7 games last season due to neck and knee injuries and has missed time in 3 of the past 4 seasons. While he remains an upgrade over his predecessor, he may not be able to play 17 games, which may be why they structured his 2-year deal with no guaranteed money in 2026. If the Vikings want an elite offensive line, the imported duo from Indianapolis better turn out. Still, there's pressure on the rest of the group to pull their weight. O'Neill remains a cornerstone and a leader in the locker room, but he'll be entering his age 30 season. After posting an overall grade of 70 in each of the past 6 seasons, the Vikings would be wise to sign him to a long-term deal that keeps him in Minnesota for the rest of his career. Then again, the cliff comes quickly. The Vikings could scramble for a replacement if O'Neill drops off or gets hurt. That's similar to what they experienced after Christian Darrisaw's multi-ligament knee injury last October, which resulted in coughing up draft capital to acquire Cam Robinson. However, it could also have long-term ramifications if the Vikings have to roll with the unproven duo of Walter Rouse or Justin Skule. Then there's the concern with Darrisaw, who suffered ACL and MCL tears last season, while O'Connell was optimistic about his recovery during the scouting combine. He had similar comments as TJ Hawkinson rehabbed from his knee injury. After nervously laughing at anyone asking for a timetable at this time last year, Hawkinson remained out until November, leaving a massive hole in the Minnesota offense. If Darrisaw is out for an extended period, it could be bad news for Blake. Brandell was the latest experiment in Minnesota's musical chairs method of handling the offensive line, but held his own, posting a 64. 9 overall grade in 7 games beside Darrisaw. However, the wheels came off when Darrisaw was lost for the season. Brandell posted a 50, 7 grade, and allowed 36 pressures while playing next to Robinson. These are all things the Vikings should consider when putting together their draft strategy. Texas Kelvin Banks Jr. Projects to be a guard in the long term, but could serve as a stopgap for Darrisaw or a long-term replacement for O'Neill after spending his collegiate career at tackle. The same thought goes for North Dakota State's Gray Zabel, who played all 5 positions along the offensive line during his time with the Bison. If Kelly wears down, Zabel can step in and potentially be a long-term solution at either guard spot. But then there's a thought to solve the left guard situation permanently. Alabama guard Tyler Booker had a disastrous workout at the Combine, but he's still a blue-chip prospect who could move Brandel to a swing role that suits his strengths. Either way, the Vikings would be wise to make another investment in their offensive line. That could be another step toward ensuring that O'Connell's blood pressure doesn't spike when speaking about the group in 2025. Pausing this news just to say that if you want YouTube to keep recommending the latest Vikes news to you, it's very important that you leave a like on this video. Thanks. Now let's get back to the news. Vikings DC Brian Flores has clear plan for Minnesota's 11 steal from Eagles in free agency. For as aggressive as the Minnesota Vikings were during the first wave of 2025 free agency, the team's need at boundary cornerback remains high on the list. As the calendar flips to April, the Vikings did, however, resign Byron Murphy Jr. to a new 3-year deal and doubled down with a couple of low-risk, high-reward signings at the start of the new league year. Judging by head coach Kevin O'Connell's comments in Florida this week at the NFL's annual owners' meetings, Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores has a clear plan for cornerback Isaiah Rodgers, who was an unsung playoff hero for the Philadelphia Eagles last year during their run to Super Bowl LIX. The Vikings were able to pry Philly's top reserve in the secondary to Minnesota on a modest 2-year, $11 million deal with about $8 million in guarantees. It was initially thought that Rodgers would compete for playing time with players like Mekhi Blackman, Jeff Okudah, Dwight McGlothern, and Najee Thompson in training camp, but he appears to have the inside track for Minnesota's Stephon Gilmore role opposite Murphy Jr. entering off-season workouts. For Kevin Seifert of ESPN, who was at the owners' meetings this week covering the Vikings, O'Connell said Flores identified Rodgers pretty early as a free agent target for his defense. When Flo has that kind of tone in his voice about guys, O'Connell said he's been pretty darn accurate. Seifert added that O'Connell sees Rodgers as an every-down impact guy for the Vikings going forward. That's a major win for Rodgers, coming off a season where he played second fiddle in Philadelphia's secondary behind rookies Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and veteran Darius Slade Jr. Rodgers worked with Philly's first-team defense throughout training camp opposite Slay, with Mitchell in the slot, before a preseason hand injury forced him to miss the team's Week 1 road trip to Brazil to kick off the 2024 NFL season overseas. Mitchell shined on the boundary in that game against the Green Bay Packers and rarely came off the field when healthy from that point forward. Rodgers wound up playing 421 total defensive snaps for the Eagles in 2024. For reference, Mitchell played 1,158 per PFF and ended up being a key depth piece during Philly's playoff run. He filled in admirably in the Eagles' snow globe win over the Los Angeles Rams in the divisional round, holding up well despite Matthew Stafford's continued attempts to test him in coverage. The 27-year-old should have fresh legs, especially after missing the entire 2023 season due to a gambling suspension. Most draft analysts believe the Vikings will target a boundary corner in the upcoming 2025 NFL Draft, but the coaches might have a different take on their cornerback room behind closed doors. Former Vikings emergency QB1 quietly signs with rival. The Minnesota Vikings have seen some interesting quarterback situations unfold over the past decade, including the past 2 offseasons. But arguably the wildest QB roller coaster we have ridden recently started with the drafting of Teddy Bridgewater number 32 overall back in 2014. After 2 years under center, Teddy appeared to be taking the next step in his quarterback development. During the 2016 preseason, until disaster struck during a late preseason practice, out of nowhere, news broke that Bridgewater had suffered a knee injury so brutal that not only was his season over, but the moment required fast thinking from then head athletic trainer Eric Sugarman just to save Teddy B's leg. How Case Keenum became the Minnesota Vikings' default miracle QBSO on September 3rd, less than a week after Bridgewater marched up and down the preseason field versus the San Diego Chargers in the Vikings' third preseason game that year, August 28th then. GM Rick Spielman and head coach Mike Zimmer sent a first-round draft pick, TP the Eagles, for injury-riddled former number 1 overall pick, Sam Bradford. His task? To immediately assume the QB1 role for a playoff-caliber MN Vikings team, having arrived in Minnesota just 1 week prior to the start of the regular season. After 2 brilliant starts to open the season, Bradford's body failed him yet again. Enter Case Keenum, who then assumed the QB1 role for the Purple. Unfortunately, the former University of Houston superstar and all-time NCAA career leader in passing yards, touchdowns, and completions couldn't help keep the Minnesota Vikings' 2016 ship afloat. He went 45 in 9 starts, and the Vikings missed the playoffs at 88. That brings us to 2017, where Keenum cemented himself in Valhalla forever. Stephon Diggs may be the player everyone remembers from the Minneapolis Miracle. He caught the pass, he stayed in bounds, he ran up the field, threw his helmet, got mobbed, etc. But it was Case Keenum who threw the miracle pass and who got the Vikings into that position on the field in the first place. Keenum was far from a perfect quarterback as a Viking. He drew 23 total starts over 2 seasons, including 14 starts as Minnesota's main starter in 2017, a season in which he threw for 3,547 yards, 22 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. Far and away the best season of his career. Keenum signs with Chicago Bears for 2025. Unfortunately, Keenum and Minnesota Vikings flopped the next week in Philadelphia, a loss that resulted in the signing of Kirk Cousins and hiring of John DeFilippo a couple months later. Nonetheless, Case Keenum has remained in the NFL since leaving the Vikings. He earned one more starting gig in Denver the next season and has since been a backup for 4 different teams. This year, held at a 5th after quietly signing with the Chicago Bears for 1 year and up to $3 million on Thursday. After spending the last 2 seasons with the Houston Texans, Keenum takes his talents to another roster where he can help mentor a young quarterback, Caleb Williams. Keenum last played an NFL game when he started twice in the place of C.J. Stroud. In 2023, he completed 64, 2 of his passes in those games, to go with just 1 TD and 3 INTs. Last year, Case Keenum suffered a foot injury that placed him on season-ending injured reserve. The $3 million contract from Chicago is the same amount he made last season with the Texans. It's a far cry from the $18 million Denver handed him as a starter following his big year in Minnesota. Still, the journeyman is looking at career earnings nearing $60 million, a number nobody needs to be embarrassed by, no matter the profession. Remember, while he may have set a bunch of college records at Houston, he entered the league undrafted in 2011. Case Keenum, the young QB mentor in Chicago, Keenum will join Caleb Williams in the Bears' QB room, now operated by first-year head coach Ben Johnson, who is coming over from Detroit and is now tasked with getting the best out of the 2024 first overall pick. Having Keenum there to help should make that job easier. Keenum has become a favorite for teams looking for a veteran QB to help bring along a young franchise QB. For the Cleveland Browns, he worked with Baker Mayfield. In Buffalo, it was Josh Allen, then the aforementioned C.J. Stroud, and now Caleb Williams. Keenum will now see his former employer twice in 2025, assuming he makes the final squad out of training camp. It will be a nice little reunion for a guy that certainly has fond memories of U.S. Bank Stadium and the Minnesota Vikings organization as a whole. And now, Vikings fan, I want to hear from you. What's your opinion on this? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I don't know if you know. This, but your opinion matters a lot for Vikes. It'll be back any moment with more Vikings news. Skol Vikings!